We're going to be rationalizing the denominator. I hope you're ready. Hope I'm ready. Are we ready? Let's do it. Okay, we'll start with 1 over, and 1 is the loneliest number, but 2 could be just as lonely as 1, and you know, I didn't mean to write that. 2 could be just as lonely as 1. I got ahead of myself on that one. 2 could be just as lonely as 1. There we go. Anyway, 2's hanging out down there with the square root of 3, but I guess they're spying on 1 because they're under the house. Yeah, whatever. So we're going to rationalize the denominator. We got to get this radical out of the denominator. So somebody came up with this idea that they didn't like radicals in the denominator, so now it's caused there's an uproar on planet Earth about the whole situation. This is what we're going to do. We're going to multiply through by what's called the conjugate. You ever heard of that before? And that is the square root of 3 minus 2. Okay, and then we're going to put the square root of 3 minus 2 in the numerator also. Now, we multiply out. Of course, look at here. That's 1 times square root of 3 minus 2. Let's not forget. Let's go ahead and multiply this out. All right, down here in the denominator, we're going to take the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, and then we're going to multiply by this guy, and then we're going to do this. Okay, did you catch all that? Anyway, that's what's about to take place here. But I'm going to go ahead and rewrite. The numerator. So we have the square root of 3 times square root of 3. Now, you're all grown up now. You should know that that's just equal to 3. Okay, square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 3. Square root of 3 times 2, remember that's minus 2, is going to be minus 2 times the square root of 3. Then we have 2 times the square root of 3. That's a positive. And then we have 2 times 2, but we got that minus there, so it's going to make that a minus 4. Okay, now look at here. Look what's going on. What color are we going to use this time? We got minus 2 times square root of 3 plus 2 times square root of 3, so guess what? They just cancel out. So now we're left with 3 minus 4, which happens to be negative 1. Now we don't leave, well, I'm going to go ahead and just write it right now. We can rewrite. We don't ever leave it like that. Okay, don't ever do that. Don't do that. I'm going to bring this negative out front. But when we do this, we're really distributing negative 1. We're multiplying negative 1 across. So it'd be negative 1 times square root of 3 minus negative 1 times square root of 2, or 2 I meant, but that's going to make that a plus 2. Okay, plus 2. All right, and of course you probably want to write it like this. I think that'd be a more appropriate way to write that. Turn the page. Let's see what we got on this next page here. We're going to try to work a couple more problems and we're going to end this section. I think rationalizing the denominator, something you should catch on pretty easily. 2. So once again, okay, we're going to multiply the denominator by the square root of 5 plus 1. And then the square root of 5 plus 1 up here in the numerator. All right. So after you do this a couple times, you'll see a pattern, and you'll be able to do it instantly. You'll say, oh, that's just 5 minus 1 is negative 4, or 4, or something like that. Okay, so look at the top. So we just rewrite 1 times the square root of 5 plus 1 is just the square root of 5 plus 1. Okay, we multiply. The square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is 5. Then we have minus, or we have plus 1 times the square root of 5. It's just square root of 5. And then we have 1 times, or negative 1 times square root of 5 is, I'm going to say minus square root of 5. And then we have negative 1 times positive 1 is just negative 1. So we're left with square root of 5 plus 1 over 5 minus 1. Those are going to cancel out. Okay. And we're left with 4. All right. Left with 4. You could possibly write it like this if you wanted to. Okay, same thing. All right, same thing. Okay, let's take a look at another one here. X over the square root of x plus the square root of y. So once again, you just do the same thing. Okay, to get that radical out of the bottom, we're going to multiply it because it's a plus sign, right? We say the square root of x minus the square root of y. But what we do in the denominator, we got to do in the numerator. Remember, this is multiplication here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just rewrite the numerator. And about left that off. Over, okay, the square root of x times the square root of x. You should know by now is just x, and the reason why. The square root of x, okay, times the square root of y. Square root of y times the square root of x. And the square root of y times the square root of y is just minus y. All right. Got some like terms. Okay, those are just going to cancel out. Square root of x times square root of y is the same thing as square root of y times square root of x. So those cancel out. I guess I better scroll to about here. See if we can get everything on here. And then we have, now you could, probably should, we'll do it here in just a second. We've been just focusing on this denominator right now. Okay, so those cancel out. You're left with x minus y. Now, what we could do is we could, what could we do? I was going to go ahead and distribute this x inside, but I don't think it's necessary. We'll leave it. We'll leave it just like that. I shouldn't do that there. Like that. Okay. So you should have an idea, somewhat of an understanding of how to rationalize the denominator. I think that's going to end this section for right now. You should have somewhat of an understanding on this, how to add, subtract, and multiply, and rationalize the denominator of radical expressions. It's going to be extremely important later on in the story. Take my word for it. Okay, I will see you in the next section.